Hi guys, welcome. I have a very special project coming to you today. I had a request from a viewer on my pumpkin dolls that I had showed in a previous photo of a craft show. And so I wanted to show you how I make these. So I cut a shape of a football and I'm tracing onto a drop cloth. You can use canvas or a drop cloth. I like the texture of either because it takes the paint well and it has a nice finish to it. So I am sewing these. Now, if you're shy about using a sewing machine, or if you don't have one, or you just don't like to sew, you can hot glue around this edge. I have not tried hot gluing to make a pumpkin, but it may work. If you can get a nice even line of glue down, you'll be able to get a nice shape to it. I feel like the glue might pinch a little and it might look a little weird, but with sewing you get a lot smoother edge. So you just put these two sides together and sew along the one edge. You want to open this up and add on your third, and don't worry about getting that top point sewed together. I always come down about a ½ inch. It's not a big deal. I'm going to cover that with a hat. So now that I've got those 3 panels sewn together, I'm going to add my 4th panel. Now you can make these any shape you want. If you add a 5th panel, you'll get a squattier, flatter type pumpkin. You can also shape these longer, so you'll get a taller style of pumpkin. I like a nice round, kind of a cutesy pumpkin. And so I'm going to get this one side sewn up. And there are our 4 panels. Yeah, you can try the hot glue. I'm curious to see what it's like. I might make one here coming up in the season and just see how that hot glue works with this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get that last panel sewn on, and here we go. You can see it's just a nice simple shape. The more you do this, the more you get used to it. And now I am taking some needle nose pliers. I'm going to tuck that top part into those pliers so I can get this turned inside out. Now you'll see that I did leave kind of like a little neck at the bottom of that football shape, and that is so I can slip it over a candlestick. And lots of trial and error. If you leave that part off, you're gonna have a hard time having a base to get this pumpkin head to stay on your candlestick with stability so it won't fall off. And so go ahead and get that stuffed. I do at this point start to figure out what side I want the face to go on, and you just kind of mold it, shape it, and you'll know what is the right side when you see it. And so what I'm going to do now is just slip this over the candlestick. Always make sure you give yourself a lot of space with that bottom neck there, because you'll have to struggle to get it over your candlestick. I've made so many of these pumpkins and I still cut myself short sometimes, but I made it this time. I'm going to tack this down with some hot glue for my first initial stability for this. I'll tell you a funny story. The reason why I go through so many steps to get these to stay down really well, I did a craft show once early on years ago, and this kid with their parent walked up to my table. I had a crow on a candlestick. It was a Halloween show, and this kid walked up to my table and he just put his hands right on that crow, and he just dug down and just twisted it around. And I looked at that thing and I said, oh my gosh, I need to figure out something better to get these to stay. And so that was a lesson learned. So that's why I do an initial hot gluing of the neck, and then I go in with a second layer of embroidery thread. I like to use the embroidery thread because it is very strong, sturdy. I can pull it tight without it breaking on me. I do one more step. I usually take the same material that I made the pumpkin out of, and I just cut a little strip. I hot glue that down, and that is to add a third layer of stability and also just to clean up those edges. This is going to be covered with a collar, like a ruffle, but I like, I like a finished look. I like things to look clean in case anybody takes a peek under there. And so this is going to make this pumpkin super, super sturdy. It's not going anywhere with 3 layers. I want to get this pumpkin head stained, so I'm going to use Folk Arts Coffee Bean is the name of the color. You can also use coffee crystals, and I'll show you here in a bit the difference between the two. The Coffee Bean acrylic paint definitely has a coffee look, and I have another story for this. The reason why I use this Coffee Bean acrylic paint, again, at a show, I had a lady pick up one of my dolls that I had used coffee stain on. She picked that thing up and she smelled it and she said, "Ooh, this smells like coffee." And I was like, oh, I was like mortified. And I looked and looked for an alternative to coffee after that. I probably found it at Michael's at the time. It was kind of a standard neutral that Michael's Crafts had available, and I saw that it said coffee bean. I thought, oh, I'm going to try that, and it ends up working really, really well if you don't like the smell of coffee. Now, there are crafters who add cinnamon or nutmeg seasoning to their coffee. That is actually a wonderful alternative, but I like the Coffee Bean acrylic paint. It's just a little bit easier for me to use. So here is a little swatch I want to show you. So this here is the coffee and water mixture, just so you can see the color difference between the two. Here is the Coffee Bean acrylic paint. Now they look very different right now. After they dry, I'll show you the difference. And that is Benjamin making an entrance. Okay, so let's get, what am I doing here? Oh, I'm making the hat. Okay, these hats, I've made several. I'm still not used to making them. I think I finally found a good enough technique here. And so I just take a square, I fold that corner over so I can get a nice shape to this. Now, again, if I'm doing a show, I'll make a pattern to where I don't have to keep messing with these hats. I can just pump them out, and one size for all of them. And so I'm just going to get this cut out, and you can make any adjusting later. The hats, they do take some practice, I'll tell you, these cones, but you can adjust them later, and I'll show you in a minute. So I'm just going to hot glue this together, and this is just for a quick and easy. I don't usually sew my hats. I do like to hot glue these. Everything else I like to hand sew. So I'm just going to get this seam glued together. If you do need to make adjustments, just fold the cone over and you'll be able to see really easily where it needs to be trimmed. And so you just take scissors and cut it along the bottom to make it even, and it turns out pretty well. Okay, so now we're going to make the collar. This is a piece of really lightweight muslin fabric. It's one of my most favorite fabrics to use. And so what I'm going to do is just figure out how long I want this collar to hang down. I want it to hang down about 2 inches. And so I'm going to be doubling this over. So it's going to be a total of 4 inches. Again, depending on the size of your pumpkin, the candlestick that you're using, there are no rules to this. You'll just have to figure out the length that you want, because you can make this ruffle as thick or as thin as you want. And so I decided I want mine to hang down 2 inches. So I did a 4-inch total so I can fold it over, and you'll see here in a minute what I mean. I'm going to take that same coffee bean remainder, and I'm just going to throw that in there. And this is a really quick and easy way to dye your fabrics. I've done this before in a video to stain your own ribbon. Guys, this is such a neat technique. I absolutely love this, and I can't wait for you to see what I'm going to add to this. You know, the acrylic really does well on this type of material. Of course, you can use whatever material you want for the collar, a printed fabric. You can use lace, velvet, anything that you like. I just like this really thin kind of material. Now I'm taking a little bit of pure black acrylic paint into some water. I've never done this before, guys, and so this is going to be new, especially for these pumpkins. What I want to do is kind of create like an ombre, and this idea just kind of came to me. I knew I wanted to dye this in that coffee kind of color, but I wanted a little bit something different, a little variation. So what I decided to do is take the material and you just kind of roll it up. Once you get that rolled up, go ahead and take your black paint with water and just dip it right there on the ends. You're going to see the paint really kind of draw up into the material. I think this is a really, really neat effect. I'm so excited to show you guys the end result. I'm going to turn this over. I'm trying not to get any paint into the middle of that. And so you can see how it just draws right up into the cotton fabric. Absolutely wonderful. You don't have to squeeze the rest of that out. I just am, because it'll make it easier to dry. And so now I want to add something to the bottom base of this candlestick. I didn't want to paint it. Sometimes I'll use a piece of felt, but the felt can get kind of weird over time. So I wanted something that was durable and neat. This is just from a gift wrap, like a gift bag, so it's sturdy. It's got a little vintage advertisements on it, and so I just threw that there on the bottom. Now I'm going to take a sanding block. I'm just going to sand this candlestick. I did paint this black ahead of time, and so I want to give this a little bit of age, a little bit of wear, just for some additional interest. Let's go ahead and get the face sewn on to our pumpkin. I picked out 2 buttons. They are different sizes. One's larger than the other, and I do like to do that. This is definitely a primitive pumpkin, and you can see here where you can tilt the eyes a little bit, but it may look a little exaggerated. Some people do theirs close together. I don't. Sometimes you can do them really far apart. That's very extreme primitive. I am just going to go along the actual seam, and that just creates a nice symmetry. It's not too extreme, but it still has a cute look. I do like to go from the top just so I can hide any knots. I don't like to put knots behind my buttons because it lifts the button and it just doesn't lay flat against the fabric. So I go from the top, and it's just kind of a little bit cleaner as well. So I'm going to kind of eyeball this where I think they should go. You can mark these. I've definitely have marked them before I sew them. That way I know for sure where they're going. But for this one, I'm just going to eyeball it. I do go through the holes a couple of times. I like a substantial thread through my buttons. I don't like to go just once. I go a few times through there. And it also just adds for, some durability. And so there I am kind of marking where I want this other eye to go. I'm just going to go right across. Now, when you use the embroidery thread, Don't cut yourself short. Cut a really, really long piece. You're always going to need more than you think. I have done it several times where I've cut myself short and then I got to go back in, and it's just kind of a pain. And so once I get that second eye sewn on, I want to start thinking about the nose. I do want to do a traditional nose for this. When it comes to primitives, there's all kinds of things you can do. You can cut out a triangle with some more of the fabric and sew that on. I opted to just use the embroidery thread to sew a nose all the way across. It's really kind of a neat primitive or rustic look. And you can mark this as well, but if you start to mark it, you got to make sure that you really get that mark covered by that embroidery thread, or you're gonna see your markings through it, like a pen or pencil. So I always opt not to mark my noses anymore. I just kind of go for it. It adds for a nice, really kind of an artistic approach. Now you can see there was a little bit of spacing between those threads. So what I do is I just draw it across the top, do a little crisscross. It really adds to the character and interest. Don't be afraid to just go for it. There are no rules. It took me a long, long time to really accept the way that I make each one and leave it alone. It ends up looking really great in the end. There are no rules to this. These are art pieces. So just have fun and create how you think it looks best. So now I'm going to put on the mouth, and I do like to kind of mark it just a little bit with the thread to see what kind of a personality is coming out of that. That one there, not so much. We got a little bit lower smile. I'm going to hit somewhere in between there. Now, I have been into using beads for these like kind of teeth, and I've done all kinds of variations with mouth. I've actually cut like a shape, and I used to sew that on with the pumpkin teeth, and it was very Tim Burton, and I would get a lot of comments about that. I've kind of moved on to using beads, and these are wooden beads. The funkier the better. I've got some really old neat looking beads that I opted not to use today. I like these. I like the size of them. Okay, so once we get that mouth sewn on, I like to go back up through the top and knot that and cut that through there. So now what I'm doing is staining the wood eyes. I used to paint my eyes before I put them on. It's really an extra step. Once you practice with this, you can stain them while they're sewn on. It's not a big deal. If you get stain on there, it's not a big deal. It adds to the character and the age. And so just throw on your antiquing wax. Now for the fun part, I'm going to take some more of the coffee bean and water mixture that we had, and I'm going to go around each of the features. This is just an additional step that adds a nice finished look. The shading really takes it to another level. Again, there are no rules to this. If you don't like this step, you can always skip it. During the actual Halloween season, sometimes I will make these really dark and go heavy on the staining, but I'm going to keep this one a little bit light today because we're not quite into the Halloween season, but I wanted to show you guys just an example of the different techniques that you can do. And so when you use these, the paint like this, you can create the individual expression for each of your dolls, and it just helps to exaggerate everything, and it adds a lot of character. I do like to go through the nose just a little bit so it's not flat, and I'm also going to go across each of these seams. There's so many different things you could do. I used to, excuse me, I used to spray this. At this point, I would spray the whole thing with water and then just drip more of the stain on there, and you can really get like a neat kind of a watercolor effect. And you can go as extreme or just like a standard kind of primitive as much as you want. Now let's do the hat. I used to sew the hats on and paint them later, but you don't want to risk getting that paint on your pumpkin. So I bit the bullet and just paint it beforehand. I don't usually like to do this, but it's worth it because I don't want to risk messing that up. So I'm just going to paint this with the remaining black paint with water. It's a little light, like it'll dry light, but that's okay because it goes with the collar that we made. So now I have these swatches that are dried, and I want to show you guys the difference between the two. That is the coffee stain, and the one on the right is the coffee bean acrylic paint. They really dry pretty similar, and so that's why I always use the coffee bean. Okay, here we are with the collar, you guys. Look. Oh my gosh, I think this is, I just love it. I think it's so beautiful. Now I could go along the edge with a darker black paint. That would look really, really pretty, but I'm going to leave this today, and I've got plenty of time to make more of this kind of staining technique. I think this is absolutely gorgeous. Again, there's all kinds of variations you can make with these collars. I've done like hand painted polka dots. You can do stripes on yours. You can do all kinds of stamping. But today I wanted to try the ombre just to see what it looks like. So I'm going to do a straight running stitch through the middle of this. And I'm just going to clip these ends just so it doesn't open up on me when I try to iron. And I just do a light press. Not a big deal. I know I don't have a towel underneath of this. I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to press lightly and get that seam flat so it'll tie around the neck a lot easier. I'm going to take the ends of the collar and I'm just going to tie this around the back, and I do leave a little bit of give on this because the slope of the candlestick, this collar will fall. So I leave a little bit of a give. That way I can throw some hot glue in there. Now, I don't trust my hot glue gun right now. I'm in between hot glue guns, and so I'm going to get that Surebonder that everybody's been telling me about. But for now, I'm going to do a little bit of E6000 with my hot glue just to make sure that this isn't going to go anywhere. So I throw that on just a couple of places. I'm going to stuff the hat just midway. I want to leave the top of that so it can kind of curve over a little bit. So I'm going to show you a couple of angles. You could do a really cute side angle, absolutely adorable. You can also go to the front, not so much, to the back, the other side. I'm going to go right to the center and just over a little bit. You'll know, your pumpkin will tell you what kind of an angle to do, and you'll see once you make one. And so go ahead and just do a running stitch along here with that same embroidery thread. I like the look of it and the durability. I was going to add something to the top of this hat, but I felt like the collar did a lot of work for this. I'm going to leave it, but I am going to add some buttons. And so here we go. I've got these really great kind of I don't know if it's like a coconut shell button, but it's two-toned and it goes really well with the coffee staining. I'm just going to do 3 of these right across the front. I always like to add embellishments, and so I'm just going to take this tag that I took some ephemera and glued it to chipboard for stability. I punched a hole through the center, and now I'm just going to use some stamps. It's going to be October 31st. And so I do like to use October 31st on a lot of my stuff during this season. Also, I'm going to take that sponge applicator and just go around the edges with a little bit of black. I think it's going to create a nice little age effect. That's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.